This skyscraper cost $8 billion to build. Today, it's worth zero. Not a single person has ever worked here, slept here, or even ridden its elevators. And it's not alone. From North Korea to Los Angeles, the world's tallest abandoned towers tell a story you won't believe. A story where greed, politics, and bad math collide. Skyscrapers should be symbols of progress, but for these 9 towers, or should we call it ghost scrapers, progress failed miserably. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why a 600-meter building in China has been empty for a decade, why North Korea's tallest structure has no elevators, and how a $1 billion LA project became a graffiti jungle. These are not just failures, they're crime scenes. The victims, taxpayer money, workers' lives, and the futures of entire cities. Let's investigate why these billion-dollar towers became concrete coffins. Here's the scale of the problem. Globally, abandoned skyscrapers represent over $200 billion in wasted investment. That's more than the GDP of many countries. And it's not just about money, it's about time. On average, it takes 14 years for a ghost scraper to fail completely. 14 years of planning, building, and hoping, only for it all to collapse. Skyscrapers are born from 3 ingredients: money, ego, and optimism. But when one ingredient fails, the whole structure crumbles. In the 21st century alone, over 200 skyscrapers taller than 150 meters have been abandoned mid-construction. From North America to Asia, these towers tell a story of overconfidence, mismanagement, and sometimes pure bad luck. But each one is unique. Each has its own story of how things went wrong. Let's start with number 9. Rio de Janeiro is a city of breathtaking beauty and contrasts. Known for its vibrant culture and stunning landscapes, it's also home to Tory Abraham Lincoln, a haunting reminder of Brazil's turbulent economic history. At 122 meters tall, this skyscraper was once envisioned as a beacon of modern urban living. Today, it's little more than an abandoned shell. Construction on Tory Abraham Lincoln began in the late 1960s during Brazil's military dictatorship. This was a time of rapid urbanization, with developers racing to build high-rise residential buildings to accommodate Rio's growing middle class. The tower was designed to house hundreds of families in spacious apartments with panoramic views of the city. But as construction neared completion in 1974, cracks began to emerge, both literally and figuratively. Engineers discovered serious structural flaws in the building's foundation. These issues raised concerns about its stability, especially in a city prone to heavy rains and occasional landslides. Work on Tory Abraham Lincoln came to an abrupt halt. Developers faced mounting costs to fix the structural issues, but Brazil's economy was already struggling under inflation and political instability. With no funding left to address the problems, construction was abandoned entirely. Over time, nature began reclaiming the structure. Trees and vines now grow through its cracks, while birds nest in its empty hallways. The building has become a hotspot for squatters and illegal activity, raising concerns among local residents and authorities. In recent years, there have been calls to repurpose Tory Abraham Lincoln into affordable housing or community spaces. But so far, no concrete plans have materialized. Our next ghost scraper takes us to Mexico. Mexico City is home to some of the most distinctive architecture in Latin America, and few buildings are as recognizable as the Insignia Tower. Completed in 1962, this 127-meter-tall structure was designed by renowned architect Mario Pani and was originally intended to house the headquarters of Banobras, the National Bank of Public Works. But while its unique triangular design made it an architectural landmark, its story is one of decline, abandonment, and reinvention. When it was built, the Insignia Tower was a symbol of progress. Mexico City was rapidly expanding, and vertical construction was seen as the answer to rising land costs and population growth. The tower became a centerpiece of the Tlatelolco housing complex, a bold urban development that aimed to modernize the city. But this optimism didn't last. In 1985, a devastating earthquake struck Mexico City, causing widespread destruction. Many of Mario Pani's residential buildings in Tlatelolco were severely damaged or collapsed entirely, leading to significant loss of life. Although the Insignia Tower itself survived without structural damage, it was even inspected and declared safe multiple times. The disaster cast a long shadow over Pani's legacy and the entire Tlatelolco project. The earthquake wasn't just a physical disaster, it also shattered public confidence in the area. Over time, businesses moved out, residents left, and Tlatelolco became synonymous with failure. By 1985, Banobras vacated the Insignia Tower entirely, leaving it abandoned for decades. For years, this once proud skyscraper stood as a ghostly reminder of Mexico City's turbulent history. Despite being one of the safest buildings in the city, engineered to withstand earthquakes up to 8.5 on the Richter scale, it remained empty. Then came a glimmer of hope. In 2008, American real estate company Cushman & Wakefield purchased the building and began extensive renovations. They rebranded it as Corporativo Tlatelolco and started leasing office spaces by 2011. Today, the Insignia Tower houses government offices like Mexico's Ministry of Public Education and serves as a hub for administrative work. It even features a carillon, a massive set of 47 bronze bells gifted by Belgium that occasionally chimes through Mexico City's evening air. While it may no longer be abandoned, the Insignia Tower's story is far from forgotten. And while this building found new life after decades of neglect, not every skyscraper is so lucky. Let's move on to our next ghost scraper. New Orleans is a city known for its vibrant culture, historic architecture, and resilience in the face of adversity. But standing at 162 meters tall, the Plaza Tower tells a different story, a story of ambition overshadowed by poor planning and environmental challenges. When it was completed in 1969, Plaza Tower was the tallest building in Louisiana and the third tallest in the southeastern United States. Designed by Leonard R. Spangenberg Jr., it was built to symbolize New Orleans' economic growth during the post-World War II boom. The tower housed oil companies, law firms, and other major businesses that were thriving at the time. For decades, Plaza Tower stood as a beacon of progress. But by the late 1980s, cracks began to appear, both figuratively and literally. Asbestos was discovered throughout the building in the early 1990s, creating serious health concerns for tenants. Combined with mold issues caused by poor ventilation systems, Plaza Tower quickly became uninhabitable. By 2002, all tenants had moved out, leaving it completely abandoned. But that wasn't the end of its troubles. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans with devastating force. While Plaza Tower survived structurally, it suffered significant water damage from flooding and leaks. Any hopes of reviving it were dashed as New Orleans focused on rebuilding homes and infrastructure for its residents. So why hasn't it been demolished? The answer comes down to money. Estimates suggest that tearing down Plaza Tower would cost at least $25 million, a price tag that no private developer or government agency has been willing to pay. And here's where things get complicated. Even if someone wanted to redevelop the site, they'd have to deal with extensive environmental remediation before construction could begin. That means more time, more money, and more risk. Today, Plaza Tower is little more than an eyesore, a decaying monument to an era when bigger was always considered better. It's been called everything from the Mold Tower to New Orleans' biggest mistake. But here's an important question. Should cities like New Orleans invest millions to demolish their own mistakes? Or should they find ways to repurpose these aging giants? From asbestos contamination to hurricane damage, Plaza Tower's story is one of missed opportunities and mounting challenges. But while this skyscraper fell victim to structural flaws, our next skyscraper takes us halfway around the world to Bangkok, where financial collapse left behind one of Asia's most infamous abandoned towers. Nicknamed the Ghost Tower, Sathorn Unique was meant to be one of the city's most luxurious residential and commercial skyscrapers. Instead, it became one of Asia's most infamous abandoned buildings. Construction began in 1990 during a period of rapid economic growth in Thailand. The vision was ambitious, a 49-story skyscraper featuring luxury apartments, high-end retail spaces, and panoramic views of Bangkok's Chao Phraya River. It was designed by Rangsan Torsuwan, a prominent Thai architect who believed the tower would symbolize Bangkok's emergence as a global metropolis. But then came the Asian financial crisis of 1997. Thailand's economy collapsed almost overnight. The baht, Thailand's currency, lost over half its value, and countless businesses went bankrupt. Among them was Rangsan Torsuwan's development company. With no funding to continue construction, work on Sathorn Unique came to an abrupt halt. By that point, the building was already 97% complete. Its concrete frame was finished, its balconies installed, but elevators, plumbing, electrical systems, none of it ever materialized. For decades now, Sathorn Unique has stood as a ghostly monument to unrealized ambition. Urban explorers and thrill seekers have turned it into a popular destination despite warnings from authorities about about safety risks. Since 2010, over 200 people have been arrested for trespassing at Sathorn Unique. Some climbers have even scaled its rooftop to capture breathtaking but dangerous views of Bangkok. But not all visitors come for adventure. Some believe Sathorn Unique is cursed. Local legends claim that bad feng shui doomed the project from the start, pointing to its proximity to a nearby temple and cemetery as evidence. Superstition aside, there are more practical reasons why this tower remains abandoned. Developers still owe creditors over $140 million in unpaid debts related to the project. Legal disputes over ownership have dragged on for decades, making it nearly impossible for anyone to revive or repurpose the building. So what does the future hold for Sathorn Unique? Some have proposed turning it into a vertical garden or an art installation. Others argue it should be demolished entirely. But with its ownership still tied up in legal limbo, this ghost tower isn't going anywhere anytime soon. From Bangkok's ghost tower to our next story in Caracas, Venezuela, where an unfinished skyscraper became home to thousands during one of history's worst economic collapses, let's move on to number 5 on our list. In the heart of Caracas, Venezuela, stands the Centro Financiero Confinanzas, a 190-meter skyscraper that was supposed to symbolize the country's financial prosperity. But today, it's better known as the Tower of David, an unfinished high-rise that became an unlikely home for thousands of squatters during one of Venezuela's worst economic crises. Construction on the Centro Financiero Confinanzas began in 1990. The project was spearheaded by David Brilenburg, a prominent Venezuelan banker who envisioned the tower as a hub for banking and commerce. It was designed to include office spaces, luxury apartments, a helipad, and even its own 5-star hotel. But in 1993, just 3 years after construction began, David Brilenburg passed away unexpectedly. Shortly after his death, Venezuela's banking sector collapsed in what became known as the Venezuelan banking crisis. The government seized dozens of banks, inflation skyrocketed, and funding for the project dried up completely. By 1994, construction on the Centro Financiero Confinanzas came to a halt. At that point, the building was around 60% complete. Its concrete frame was finished, but it lacked windows, elevators, plumbing, and electricity. For years, the tower sat abandoned, a massive shell looming over Caracas's skyline. But in 2007, something unexpected happened. As Venezuela's economy spiraled further into crisis under President Hugo Chávez's government, thousands of people began moving into the unfinished skyscraper. By 2011, more than 3,000 squatters were living in the Tower of David. Entire families occupied its empty floors, turning them into makeshift homes. Without elevators or running water, residents hauled supplies up dozens of flights of stairs. Some even built small businesses inside: barbershops, convenience stores, and community centers. The Tower of David became a city within a city, a vertical slum that reflected Venezuela's deepening economic and social crisis. But it wasn't without risks. Residents faced constant dangers from structural instability, crime within the tower, and even fatal accidents. In 2014, after years of international attention and growing safety concerns, the Venezuelan government began relocating residents out of the tower. Over several months, families were moved to government housing projects across Caracas. Today, the Tower of David stands empty once again. But its story isn't over yet. In recent years, there have been proposals to repurpose the building. Some suggest turning it into affordable housing or office spaces. Others argue it should be demolished entirely. However, with Venezuela still grappling with political instability and economic collapse, any plans for its future remain uncertain. And while this building became a lifeline for thousands during desperate times, our next skyscraper tells a very different story. One where engineering mistakes brought an ambitious project crashing down before it could even stand tall. Let's head to New York City for number 4 on our list. New York City is no stranger to ambitious real estate projects. It's a city where skyscrapers rise at a dizzying pace, each one vying for its place in the iconic skyline. But not every project reaches the finish line. One Seaport, a 204-meter residential tower, promised luxury waterfront living with stunning views of the East River. Instead, it became one of the city's most expensive construction failures. The vision for One Seaport was bold: a 57-story luxury condominium with prices starting at $1.2 million for a one-bedroom unit and climbing to over $20 million for penthouses. Located in Manhattan's financial district, it was marketed as the ultimate address for New York's elite. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. From the very beginning, there were concerns about the project's foundation. The site was located on soft soil near the East River, a known challenge for high-rise construction in Lower Manhattan. Despite warnings from geotechnical engineers, developers pushed forward with cost-cutting measures that would later prove disastrous. In an effort to save $4 million, contractors ignored critical soil reports and opted for a cheaper foundation design. In 2018, disaster struck. The building began to sink, literally. Engineers discovered that one Seaport's foundation had shifted by 7 inches, causing cracks to form in its concrete structure. Construction was immediately halted and lawsuits began flying. The legal battles were as towering as the building itself. Developers sued contractors sued engineers, and buyers who had already paid millions for their units demanded refunds. By 2020, there were at least 14 separate lawsuits tied to one Seaport, with claims totaling over $100 million. Meanwhile, costs continued to spiral out of control. Repairing the foundation alone was estimated at $200 million, far more than developers could afford. With no clear path forward, construction was abandoned entirely. But here's where things get even more complicated. One Seaport wasn't just a financial disaster. It also left dozens of buyers in limbo. Many had already paid deposits on units that would never be completed. For some, this meant losing hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. Today, One Seaport remains an unfinished skeleton, a glaring reminder that even in New York City, where real estate is king, ambition without proper planning can lead to ruin. And while this project failed due to engineering mistakes and cost-cutting measures, our next skyscraper tells a very different story, one where billions were spent on luxury condos that no one wanted to buy. Let's head to Los Angeles for number 3 on our list. Los Angeles is a city of dreams, where ambitious projects often aim to redefine urban living. Oceanwide Plaza was one such project, a $1 billion development that promised to bring luxury condos, high-end retail, and 5-star hotels to the heart of downtown LA. But today, it's a colossal failure that has become one of the city's most infamous unfinished skyscrapers. The plan for Oceanwide Plaza was nothing short of grand. Developed by Chinese real estate giant Oceanwide Holdings, the project included 3 towers, 2 residential, and 1 hotel, rising up to 206 meters. The complex was designed to feature 504 luxury condos, 184 hotel rooms, and over 150,000 square feet of retail space. Construction on Oceanwide Plaza began in 2015 during a period of rapid growth for downtown Los Angeles. The area was undergoing a transformation, with new developments like the Ritz-Carlton residences and Metropolis redefining luxury living in the city. Oceanwide Plaza was set to be the crown jewel of this revitalization. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. By 2019, construction had slowed to a crawl as Oceanwide Holdings faced mounting financial problems back in China. The company was struggling under billions of dollars in debt, and its overseas projects, including Oceanwide Plaza, were among the first to feel the impact. In January 2019, construction on Oceanwide Plaza came to an abrupt halt. Workers were sent home, leaving behind an unfinished structure with no clear timeline for completion. At that point, developers had already spent over $1 billion on the project, but they needed hundreds of millions more to finish it. And here's where things get even more complicated. While Oceanwide Holdings struggled with its finances, Los Angeles real estate market was also shifting. Demand for ultra-luxury condos began to decline as buyers grew wary of oversaturation in the market. By 2020, only 15 out of Oceanwide Plaza's planned 504 condos had been sold, a devastating statistic for a project of this scale. With no buyers and no funding to continue construction, the project became stuck in limbo. So why did Oceanwide Plaza fail while other luxury projects in downtown LA succeeded? The answer lies in timing and ambition. It came at a time when buyers were becoming more cautious about investing in luxury properties. There was simply too much supply and not enough demand. And while this project failed due to financial mismanagement and market miscalculations, our next skyscraper tells an even stranger story, one where political isolation turned an ambitious hotel into one of history's most bizarre architectural failures. Let's head to Pyongyang for number 2 on our list. In Pyongyang, North Korea's capital, stands one of the most infamous skyscrapers in the world, the Ryugyong Hotel. At 330 meters tall, it's not only the tallest building in North Korea, but also one of the tallest abandoned structures on Earth. Nicknamed the Hotel of Doom, this building has been under construction for over 3 decades and remains a symbol of unfulfilled ambition. The story of the Ryugyong Hotel begins in 1987, during a period when North Korea was eager to showcase its power and modernity to the world. The government announced plans to build a massive luxury hotel with 3,000 rooms, 5 revolving restaurants, and state-of-the-art amenities. It was meant to attract foreign investors and tourists while demonstrating that North Korea could compete with its capitalist neighbors. The project was ambitious, to say the least. At 330 meters tall and with 105 floors, it would have been the tallest hotel in the world at the time. Construction began quickly, with workers racing to complete it in time for the 13th World Festival of Youth and Students in 1989, a major international event hosted by North Korea. But as with so many ambitious projects on this list, reality soon caught up with ambition. By 1992, construction had come to a complete halt. The Soviet Union had collapsed, cutting off critical financial support for North Korea's economy. The country plunged into a severe economic crisis known as the Arduous March, leaving no resources to finish what was supposed to be its crowning achievement. For over a decade, the Ryugyong Hotel stood as an empty concrete shell, a towering embarrassment that loomed over Pyongyang's skyline. Its incomplete state became an international punchline, with critics calling it the worst building in human history. Then, in 2008, something unexpected happened. An Egyptian company called Orascom Group signed a deal with North Korea to modernize its telecommunications network. As part of this agreement, Orascom also invested millions into reviving construction on the Ryugyong Hotel. By 2011, the building's exterior was finally completed, 24 years after construction first began. The once barren concrete frame was now covered in reflective glass panels that gave it a sleek and modern appearance. But while its exterior looked finished, its interior told a very different story. To this day, no elevators have been installed inside the Ryugyong Hotel. Its planned restaurants and guest rooms remain empty shells without plumbing or electrical systems. Despite appearances, this skyscraper is still far from functional. Instead of admitting defeat, North Korea has tried to mask its failure by using propaganda light shows to project images onto the building's facade. These displays are meant to distract from what lies beneath, an empty shell that cost billions but serves no purpose. Estimates suggest that completing and opening Ryugyong Hotel would cost an additional $2 billion, money that North Korea simply doesn't have. For now, it remains an unfinished monument to overambition and isolation. And while this building remains frozen in time due to political isolation and economic collapse, our final skyscraper tells a story of sheer scale, an abandoned giant that holds the title of tallest unfinished building on Earth. Let's head back to China for number 1 on our list. This is Goldin Finance 117, also known as the walking stick due to its unique shape. At 597 meters tall, it's the tallest abandoned building in the world and one of the most expensive construction failures in history. What was supposed to be a symbol of China's economic might has instead become a cautionary tale about overbuilding and financial mismanagement. The vision for Goldin Finance 117 was nothing short of extraordinary. Designed to be one of the tallest buildings on Earth, it was planned as a mixed-use skyscraper featuring luxury office spaces, a 5-star hotel, high-end retail, and even an observation deck with panoramic views of Tianjin. Construction began in 2008 during China's real estate boom. By 2010, China was building skyscrapers at an unprecedented rate. Developers were racing to create taller and more extravagant buildings in cities across the country. Goldin Finance 117 was meant to put Tianjin on the map as a global financial hub, an ambitious goal for a city often overshadowed by nearby Beijing. But as construction progressed, cracks began to appear, not in the building itself, but in the economic logic behind it. By 2015, Goldin Finance 117 was nearly complete. Its exterior was finished, and all that remained were interior fittings and final touches. Yet work suddenly stopped. The problem? Money, or rather, the lack of it. The project's developer, Goldin Properties Holdings, faced mounting financial difficulties as China's real estate market began to cool down. Demand for luxury office space spaces and high-end hotels plummeted just as construction costs soared past $8 billion. Adding to the challenges was Tianjin's own economic slowdown. While cities like Shanghai and Shenzhen thrived as global business hubs, Tianjin struggled to attract tenants for its growing number of skyscrapers. By 2016, nearly half of Tianjin's office spaces were sitting empty, a staggering statistic that made it clear there was no market for Goldin Finance 117. And then came regulatory changes. In 2022, China introduced new rules banning buildings taller than 500 meters unless they served practical purposes. This effectively sealed Goldin Finance 117's fate as an unfinished giant with no path forward. With its staggering height and equally staggering cost, this skyscraper is a fitting end to our list, a reminder that bigger isn't always better when it comes to urban development. These massive structures might be empty today, but their stories aren't over yet. With the right vision and investment, they could be repurposed into something meaningful. Vertical farms to feed growing cities, affordable housing for those in need, or even research facilities in schools. But repurposing skyscrapers isn't easy. It takes creativity, funding, and political will to turn these billion-dollar skeletons into something useful. The question is, what would you do with them? Let us know in the comments below.